I think.
Yeah, I mean, it is an interesting balance, right? Like, so Reddit starts off as literally, let's just, I think that at one point they were taking donations. They just want it to be a great community. And I loved Reddit, right? Like, still is a great platform. And back in 2010 or so, they organized this huge rally. It wasn't Reddit, the company, but it was like the community that got together in Washington, D.C., where I was living at the time. They got together like 100,000 people, and they filled up the National Mall, and they had this event with Stephen Colbert and the other guy, Jon Stewart, and had a bunch of celebrities on it. It was like, wow, this is really like, this is a huge deal, right? And so Reddit at that point kind of got involved with it. And then all of a sudden big money starts rolling in. They sold it and they bought it back. And then now they're considering going public with this. And so I think their original model wasn't really a business model. It was more, this is for everybody, by the people, for the people type thing. And then eventually they're like, all right, well, we got to pay the servers. There's a lot of traffic. Yeah. We got to start doing some things. And then one thing leads to the next. Now they want to do an IPO, which now forces their EBITDA, the financial statements to be nice and clean with that. So they're still kind of maneuvering it, but I don't think it's well defined, right? Like, it's a weird thing that you register a subreddit, and then if it gets big, then they subjectively go and try and get it, right? Like, there's a bunch of other ones like WallStreetBets and other ones where they don't seem to care about.
But couldn't they argue that that's for the benefit of, let's say I'm looking at that and finding like Bitcoin bets. Let's just say that's a subreddit. I see it getting big. I didn't create it, but I could go and register the trademark for that. Can't just any random person go and do that? So it's better for Reddit to do that than some rando.
Yeah, look, I get that point. I understand they want to be able to protect it, right? Because especially if something gets big, like something like WallStreetBets, and that's pretty much a threat. Trademark laws, thankfully, they're relatively fair, all right? So when you all go to trademark someone, they're going to be like, well, show me that you've used it. Right? Or show me that you have the intention to be used if nobody's used it before. And as part of that process, one of the final steps is they publish this trademark application to the world, and anyone that has any objections can come in and say, no, if you grant that person that trademark, that's going to harm my business, right? And so then that starts the whole process.
Got it. So what are your thoughts now about how WallStreetBets has evolved? Do you think today it's the same feeling or the same intention as it was back when you started it, or do you think it's evolved and taken a life of its own, and it's different from what you first had in mind?
It's shifted as it's grown, but it has a lot of things that are still the same, right? The community gets started, and it is a fun, honest, like brutally unapologetic place for people to hang out and to learn. And so this is, oftentimes I get the question like, so why do people brag about their losses and on WallStreetBets? I'm like, it's not so much that they're bragging, even if it looks like it. Maybe there is a little bit of kind of flexing there, but it's more, this is real, right? This is, in the real world, you both win and lose money. And in this case, I got my ass handed to me. So give me like a virtual hug, right? And same thing, like, look how much money I made, or sometimes look how much money I made, and then look how much I just lost it again. But this, let's have fun. It's just been no filter, offensive a lot of the times, right? There's just a lot of locker room banter, right? It's been predominantly male for as long as I can remember. So that hasn't changed, but it's started shifting. Like some of the aspects of it, which I wasn't happy with, and still aren't, is you have some of this unapologetic, offensive speech turn into hate speech, right? And it becomes counterproductive. Or even though there's no political, like there's just, here we're talking about stocks or betting or whatever, we're not deviating from this, including politics, right? Just to make this nice silo of it. People do start deviating in that direction. So some of that, I think, is because it's grown so much, and so you have slightly less control. But the overall tone of fun, of really creative, really smart people that have come up. WallStreetBets became real famous here with GameStop, right? But as you know, because you had a podcast about this a couple years ago, where these people took out infinite leverage, right? Like the infinite margin cheat code, right? And prior to that, they've done other stuff that was similar, like with the box spread. Like, there's been really clever. These people come together and they say, let's exploit an inefficiency, and they do it well.
Right. That was WallStreetBets, the Robinhood infinite money glitch. Wow, that was the original. I completely forgot about that. Yeah, that was like 2 years ago. Jeez, I love that guy. We had him on. So for those that are not aware, this guy found a loophole in Robinhood where I forget exactly how it worked, but he was basically he was taking on margin. I think he was selling options, or he was doing something with options and then selling those options. So Robinhood gave him a credit back. But because he still has that position, but he got a credit back, Robinhood then doubled his margin and he was able to do it again. And then he would double his margin again. And so with like $2,000, he was able to get like $1.7 million worth of margin. And the downside with this is that it doesn't seem like I would play it smart. Like, I think if you want $1.7 million worth of margin, at least do something where you have a high likelihood of making money. Because, you have to pay it back at some point, and they're going to learn about it. But it just seems so many people at that time were just making these ridiculous bets with like a 1 in 100 chance of like being big, and then they would lose it and just delete the app. And but you know what? Like, I guess we could kind of talk about this now. It's been 2 years. Robinhood, I hope I can talk about it. Anyway,
Sure, go for it.
My understanding is that Robinhood settled a lot of these cases for pennies on the dollar. So someone would owe like $2 million, and Robinhood would be like, "Hey, just we'll call it this amount. You could pay us off over time. We'll call it even." Like, they got out good. But I think Robinhood is afraid that these people could lawyer up and be like, "Well, you allowed some 18-year-old kid to get on infinite margin in a way that your platform encouraged and allowed. He's not responsible for that loss. That's a glitch on your platform. He doesn't have the money." Plus, here's the thing. When you're 19, you have no assets. You have no money to pay for. What are they going to collect? They have a judgment against you. 1.7. Oh, I'm bankrupt now.
No,
so
and then
what?
they go on social media and talk about that, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden they're the bad guys, like
So
Robinhood
it's-
is wrong. No, but you know what's interesting about that? So,
Yeah.
like, when part of when I started WallStreetBets, I'm on the heels of the financial crisis, right? Like, I'd actually lost a job to the financial crisis, so to some extent, and I lived in DC where a lot of the Occupy Wall Street movement. So I had all these things fresh on my mind. And I started learning about these things called leveraged ETFs, and these are like these exotic variety, which are just basically math formulas. And I was like, how can these things exist, and why are they legal? And didn't we just learn our lesson? This thing is, the counterparty risk, and if you're not supposed to be able to sell short unless you have the collateral or experience, but you can buy an inverse ETF, and somebody else is taking on the infinite risk and weird stuff, right? So I'm mad, and I write this entire blog post, and I was like, I'm going to publish this, and the whole world is going to be just as outraged as me. And then I was like, nah, no one's going to read my blog post. Instead, that's when I'm like, I can't beat them, join them. I'm going to start I'm going to start using these leveraged ETFs with stock options on top of them to do some crazy things. And then let people, let people become outraged on how we use this. And that's how you'll end up starting this dialogue, right? And that's why I called it WallStreetBets, is I wanted to make a statement there that this is the casino, right? And this is a lot of fun. That ethos continued to grow, which also is right around the time when Bitcoin started. Also a similar language and philosophy in mind, right? With like F the central bank and the whole system. But anyways, but this is we're hoping to spark a conversation. So throughout this entire time, you fast forward to this moment where these people take on risk that they cannot handle, right? Like, well, I don't have that money. Like, it's if the banks were able to do this in 2008, they didn't have the money, they got bailed out. It's like, well, then come get me. I don't have $1 million to see. This is now your problem. It's the typical, if you owe the bank $1, it's your problem. And if you owe them $1 million, it's theirs. Like, this is kind of that. And that continued through today. And then obviously with GameStop and these other philosophies. So